Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the nuts and bolts of MRP. I'm Denise, and back with me to present live is Don Lindsey, 32Soft's QAD and MRP guru. I will turn things over to Don in about 90 seconds. First, though, some super quick housekeeping. New this year, we are happy to share that all registrants who attend the live webinar session will be offered a certificate of attendance. Although your thank you for attending email tomorrow will be from Alex, the link to it is generated by GoToWebinar automatically. So we'll be unable to recreate the link, so be sure to download your certificate before deleting the email. And now, as I hand off to Don, here are some highlights among the vast experience Don brings to his every presentation.
Good morning or afternoon. So over the last couple of months, we've covered a number of subjects from product change control, security access, SAF codes, and yet last week or last month, Denise and Olena walked us through the 32Soft distribution order workbench, all of which are available on the 32Soft website. So today I'd like to talk about MRP. Here are just a few of the things we'd like to cover today. We're going to spend most of our time on the item master and the bill of material, and then since MRP is kind of a complex subject, we're going to not be able to get through all of it in our normal 40-minute webinar. So Denise and I have scheduled this for two sessions, today, the 21st, and part two, which we call the ripple effect of changes in QAD to MRP on March 20th. So join us for that. I always like to emphasize the power of vocabulary for a particular function, this time MRP. Many terms that we need to be familiar with when talking about material requirements planning. If you don't understand a term or meaning of a phrase that I use, you can look it up on Google, ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, Perplexity. There's so many now of these AI applications that help you understand information. Remember, everybody uses terms that are basically the same, but different for your organization. You need to understand how your organization uses those terms. But before you start, I suggest you will need a solid set of work instructions and a company data dictionary. So what are the primary issues facing manufacturing companies today? These include such things as supply chain disruptions. We've got labor shortages, skill issues, the automation and technology of AI, sustainability, government regulations. All of these issues can be mitigated or solved by companies who use or understand how MRP works. Just to review a brief recap of the history of MRP, it was conceived back in the 1950s when we had mainframe computers and was codified by a small group of practitioners called Joe Orlicky, Oliver White, George Plossel, and some others. It was commercialized in the 1970s, and by the 1990s, most manufacturing companies had an MRP embedded in their system. Today, after more than 50 years, MRP has become the way of life for planning in manufacturing organizations. If you want to understand MRP, read this book. I will assume all of us have been exposed to the apex body of knowledge for the ERP process. So I won't attempt to recap the entire process. Just remember that MRP, our subject for today, exists at the center of that overall ERP concept. If you use MRP, you're in good stead. There are hundreds of thousands of people who use MRP every day to operate their businesses. And now that artificial intelligence is enhancing ERP with machine learning, forecasting, inventory optimization, risk management, natural language interactions, simulation of scenarios, the future is very exciting. Makes me want to be young again. Remember, the type of interface of the graphical representation of MRP on your screen has nothing to do with the way that MRP works. There have been many different interfaces over the life of QAD, and there will be many more. But as Oliver White says, MRP is MRP is MRP. Let's consider the data structure of QAD and their relationship to MRP. QAD has 5 primary demarcations of data: a database, a domain, an entity, a site, and locations. A domain represents a distinct business operation with a single currency and a chart of account. The entity concept in QAD allows for maintenance and separation of data and system processes for different companies or divisions using the same overall ERP domain. Site maintenance defines records that identify the place where you manufacture and store inventory. This is where you do MRP in QAD. The location maintenance specifies areas in a particular site where inventory is stored. This is referred to as the perpetual record. Control files determine how QAD will process information having to do with a particular function in QAD. In later versions of QAD, the 36.9 operational account control menu defines how the accounting processes of various control files will behave. You should review and understand each of the field elements in every control file that affect how MRP is dealt with in QAD. Now that we have a basic understanding of the data structures, let's look at the tables. We'll spend most of our time on the item master and the bill of material, and then next month we'll cover the perpetual record, purchase orders, work orders, sales orders, etc. The item master file menu system allows one to create and control item numbers in QAD. Let's look at the detail of the item master file. The layout of the menus for the item master update are intended to make it easier for menu security to allow people in engineering, accounting, planning to get the piece of information that they need. Caution, navigation will change radically in QAD 03. We're excited that Tony Winter is the keynote speaker at the spring MUG meeting so that we can better understand what changes are coming. So let's look at 1.4.1. First, we have the item number, single most important element in any ERP system. The item master definition starts with the item number. The number one rule of the item number is uniqueness of identification. Only one name for one thing, not many names for the same thing or many things with the same name. You need to have uniqueness of identification. The unit of measure refers to the stocking unit of measure. We'll discuss this a little bit later. And I have seen more issues with the unit of measure than I would care to discuss. QAD has 2 description fields. As always, noun, adjective, adjective is the preferred format for descriptions. And the second description, caution, does not always print where you think it might print. The product line, although not directly impacting MRP, is used to determine and assign transactional activity to the accounts in the general ledger. Be cautious, as this affects the accountants, and you always want happy accountants. The item data frame, the field added, there's no real impact in MRP, but it's important for audit control. If you do not use product change control, the PCC module, this field is not validated and is used for reference only. We'll talk about a PCC next month. The promo group, optional code, indicating a group that this is included for sales promotions. The item type has no impact on MRP, but it's very handy for sorting and reporting. This is one of those fields that I've seen decimated by documentation supervisors changing the way it's used. The status code is a code identifying a condition of the item, such as active, inactive, obsolete. Each status code can specify one or more restricted transactions. The status can significantly impact MRP. The item group is an optional code used to categorize similar items. This is validated against generalized codes and can be used for anything you want. The drawing, although it's not directly impacting the MRP, it's one of those reference fields, but you should pay special attention to the field because I've seen purchasing have significant issues with the update of this field. The item revision or reference only, again, but be cautious. And then the drawing and size field are, again, optional and usually for reference only. The price spec category field is an optional code, doesn't affect MRP. If you leave it blank, that just means that it's not combined with any other item for pricing and price breaks. The new inventory item data frame for EE has several new fields. The serial control defines whether the item needs to be serialized. The options are either mandatory or never. For serialization, you should consider traceability requirements, transaction volumes, how you're going to collect data, expiration management, etc. Lot control determines if a lot or serial number is required. The options are blank, and I'd be cautious with that. In today's data-centric economic environments, it's good to have lot numbers. The lot numbers are required with L and S for a single lot. As mentioned previously, sites are where you normally manufacture and store goods. It may be left blank, but remember, this is where MRP is exploded. The location code indicates the default physical location where an item is normally stored. This is critical. I've seen multiple issues where this is not well thought out and with regards to MRP and the perpetual record. The location type indicates the type of location, hazardous, etc. Location type in 1.4.1 must match the location type in 1.1.1 inventory code maintenance. Auto lot number determines whether the system automatically assigns lot numbers to items with lot control set to L. This applies to purchase receipts, work order receipts, backflush, labor transactions. This requires a moderate amount of effort with regards to maintenance if you're going to have lot numbers. Lot group determines how the system automatically assigns numbers to those items through 1.22.13 lot group maintenance. Article number, you can enter an article number for anything. I've seen it used for several things, such as accounting, WIP, raw, finished goods. It's a reference field only, and it can appear on several reports. The ABC classification determines the count frequency and error tolerance for each item. Remember, MRP requires 100% accurate inventory. This is the perpetual record. The average interval is the number of calendar days used as average interval for this item. The 1.5.9 item ABC report calculates average sales shipments and total quantity issued by site for this averaging value. The cycle count interval is the number of calendar days between the cycle counts for this item. The system compares today's date with the last date of a cycle count. If the intervals are greater than this specified amount, the system includes it in your count. The 1.5.9 item ABC report and update assigns ABC classifications to items. Caution, if your usage data is not accurate, you can incorrectly recalculate your ABC classification codes, which may upset the accountants. Shelf life. This can be critical to MRP processing for those items that are lot control, as this should set the items to the date received plus this shelf life. For those items which have exceeded their expiration date, caution should be taken to create a process which accounts for the restriction of those expired lots from the MRP explosion. The PO status is a default status code for items received on purchase orders, and the active box has to be checked. Same with the work order or production order release receipt status. This is used for work orders and purchase orders. The memo order type, if blank, this item has no effect on MRP if there is a value in that. If there is a memo, then the line type for purchase orders and sales orders will default to a memo type. 2019 EE had some changes for the production order processing. And this required some logic changes in QAD. So we've got this new item picking data frame. The first field is the allocation policy. This automates the process of creating inventory allocations for production requirements and bulk item picking processes. The options are general or detailed. The transfer allocation process determines if the system retains or removes detailed allocations for inventory quantities for items that are transferred when using 16.5.9 production pick list. The options are you can either keep those allocations or drop them. The allocate single lot indicates whether a sales order production should always be filled from a single inventory lot. I've worked for a couple of medical manufacturers where this is a critical field and requires a fair amount of resources to set it up. The manufacturing picking order, this is the picking sequence used when detail allocating items to production orders. This requires extensive logic and process. The picking order, either ascending or descending, tells how it's going to be printed on those production order or bulk pick lists. And the pick policy for production orders allow you to have either a no pick, a transfer, or an issue. You should be aware of the valid and non-valid combinations for those definitions. The issue policy, this comes from the old 1.4.7 or 1.4.17 location. It's now been moved to this item data picking frame. And this is how the system issues inventory quantities to items for production. You have the options of backflush, direct issue to the order, or no issue. The key item, whether the order is to start with an insufficient quantity of an item, is available. This requires a great deal of care and logic. The picking options determine the quantities to be put on the pick list. You can use picking multiples, minimums, and maximums, very similar to order modifiers for item. The shipping frame is only used for shipping and freight information, but it helps with such things as standardized shipping, transportation execution, global trade, and supplier collaboration. In the 1.4.7 item planning maintenance, the master schedule checkbox indicates that this item is master scheduled. Various reports and the master schedule order inquiry display when this is checked. You can use this with the 22.20.1 master schedule workbench. The planned order checkbox is critical. This field indicates whether MRP should plan orders for this item. The time fence is the number of calendar days inside of which material requirements planning should not automatically replan. This is critical to MRP and implements what is called a frozen time fence. Is MRP required? This is a system generated field, basically anything that creates demand or supply or changes an item, such as forecast adjustments, stock transfers, purchasing, planned order release, that triggers this, and planner should know what is causing his MRP to recalculate. The order policy sets the calculation of lot sizes for MRP. It's either POQ, period order quantity, lot for lot, economic order quantity, or one time only. The rule for blank order policy: when the order policy is blank, MRP does not plan this item. Order quantity is critical. This is the planned order quantity that is used as a lot size for order in MRP when the order policy is FOQ. The order period is the number of calendar days that MRP uses to determine the planning period for order policy POQ. I would be very cautious on using this, as it makes MRP very nervous. Safety stock is the quantity of an item that is maintained in inventory as projection against fluctuation in demand and supply. Safety stock guards against this variability, and in essence raises the net availability to this value. And be cautious, it's somewhat difficult to mathematically optimize and keep up to date safety stock in an MRP environment. Safety lead time is the number of working days early that the system should plan to use for receipt of the order. This impacts the setback for planned order releases. It's basically an artificial time buffer between MRP release and MRP due. Reorder point, demand through lead to month safety stock. Probably you're not going to use this for MRP. The system does not calculate or recommend reorder points. MRP does not use reorder point. However, you can use the 1.5.10 reorder point, which shows those items which are fallen below the reorder point quantity, or which have fallen below the safety stock quantity. The item revision, this defaults from 1.4, but can be variable. Again, cautious. Purchasing is very much impacted, both work orders and purchase orders, by the update of this field. Issue policy comes from the 1.4 item picking. This means that the items that are checked with issue policy, those are going to be issued to production work orders. The buyer planner is the name of an individual, name of responsibility, product line. See lots and lots of differences. It helps distribute and report against items. The supplier code identifies the normal or preferred supplier for this item. It doesn't have much effect, but if you're going to create the supplier, you're going to go into 36.1.4.3 business relation, create that with the accounting, payment, banking, default tabs. Then you're going to create the 20.1.1 supplier maintenance, and finally come in with 2.3.1 supplier data maintenance. So this is critical for accurate information in your supply chain. The PO site, if you're in a multi-site environment, the PO site determines which purchasing department is responsible for requisitions and purchase orders. The make-buy code, or purchase manufacturer, tells MRP to create either scheduled work orders, purchase orders, planned work orders, and the options are P for purchase, D, distribution, that's what Alina talked about last month, M, manufacturing, routing, configured line, and manufacturing. The configuration type doesn't have any impact on MRP, but defines how you treat the shipping process with either an available, assembled to order, or a kit configuration for your shipping process. Inspect, MRP could be affected by this, indicates that the item is inspected after receipt, and QAD uses purchase and inspection lead time to calculate the planned order release date for purchased items. The inspection Lead time is the normal or average number of working days on your shop calendar needed to inspect the item after it is received. The manufacturing lead time is the normal or average amount of time based on your shop calendar. I would be cautious if you are running 14.13.13, a router cost rollup. Do not check the manufacturing lead time box. If you do, that could change all of your manufacturing lead times, which will cause MRP great havoc. So be cautious. The purchasing lead time is the average or normal amount of calendar days required to complete the purchasing function. This needs constant attention. It's not a static value. Don't just set it and forget it. This needs constant update. The ATP, available to promise enforcement, that you do either none, warning, or error, available to promise doesn't have a direct impact on MRP, but MRP affects available to promise. The family ATP tells whether this pipe should be considered as a component of a family item for ATP. And the ATP horizon, again, no impact directly, but this says how far out in the future you want to take that ATP calculation. The run sequence 1 and 2 is used for repetitive, where the make by code is L. These are the codes for the item's primary and secondary run sequences. The phantom, this field, indicates whether the item is normally stocked or simply put together as part of a higher assembly. MRP processes item inventory or items in the same way as other items. However, if any phantom item is in stock, MRP plans to use that value first. The minimum order quantity, MRP uses the minimum order quantity to determine the order quantity of planned orders regardless of order policy. If the net requirement is below that amount, MRP plans that order quantity. The maximum order is simply an exception. If MRP calculates a greater value than this maximum order quantity, it creates a planned order in that needed amount. However, it creates an action message for the planner. Order multiple, MRP uses multiples to determine the quantity of planned orders only when the order policy is either POQ or lot for lot. The op-based yield determines how the system calculates yield for components of this item when the product structure and routings are exploded through MRP. You must have exact date to use this. The system derives yield percentage amounts for components from operations on the parent's item number. The enable op-based yield must also be set in 2324 MRP control to have any effect. Yield percentage indicates the percentage of an order expected to be unusable condition. This adds a message scrap requirement to MRP, which we'll look at next month. The runtime is for reference only, can appear on various reports as with setup. The EMT, if you use enterprise material transfer, you have the options of having this as a non-EMT item, a trans-ship, or a direct ship option. Auto EMT processing, this can affect MRP as it's used to determine whether this automatically creates a purchase order in the intermediate business units. The network code is for DRP, aka last month with Olena. This code is the source network code from which the system automatically creates a supplied DRP item. Routing identifies a routing or normal process for this manufacturer. This can be a routing. If you're going to use op-based yield, this needs to be exact. The BOM or formula code identifies the product structures for formulas normally used in the manufacture of this item. And the replenishment method tells the system how item planning elements should be reviewed. Is it Kanban? The default is orders. You can have DRP, family, routing, configured, purchase, manufacturer, and line. The information specified in 11.3.7, service item maintenance, critical for such things as installability, determining coverage, creation of. These should be closely coordinated with MRP, as if you use items that are required for repair, you want to plan your orders properly. The 11.3.7 service item lets you define repair, preventive maintenance, and installation, routings, and bombs. The 1.4.17 is for site-specific information. You need to be aware of the coordination between the 1.4.1 and the item site maintenance screen. Since MRP runs in the site, one needs to understand the impact of site settings on MRP. This allows for inventory planning, cost, and service. So if you have multiple site configurations, you want to be paying close attention to specific item data planning for sites and controls. If you have intersite transfers, recording, integration with other modules, and scalability. No direct impact on MRP from 1.4.9, but it's hugely critical if you want to know what your plan is going to cost. You calculate material, labor, burden, overhead, subcontract, this level cost, lower level costs. And remember, a planner's best friend is a good cost accountant. We don't have time to go over all of the aspects of item costs, but we do have several webinars out on the 32Soft website that help in that explanation. So let's talk about a couple of the other functions that play into MRP. 1.13, unit of measure plays heavily as the stocking unit of measure. Stocking unit of measure is the primary stocking, so that if you stock an item at each and you buy it at 1,200 ESAs per case, you can set that stocking unit of measure against an alternate unit of measure with a corresponding conversion factor. This is one of the most abused and misunderstood functionalities I've seen in QAD. The 1.5 or 1.1.5 item status code. This defines the status associated with items. You can use restricted transactions for a particular item. Very helpful if not overused. The 1.1.1 inventory status code, similar to the 1.1.5. This allows you to set the status code for a lot of material. And here you can say whether it's available, whether it's nettable, that's critical to MRP, or whether you can overissue. You can restrict transactions, especially like ordering sales order, work order creation, purchase order equation. Some transactions required by the system. This is very important for booking history. The planning elements for MRP, the bill of material, sets material requirements planning, production planning, scheduling, inventory, cost, engineering change. Bills of material define the structure of your product, the timing of the product through MRP, costs, forecasting, and contribute to the statement of the build process. Bills of material are used to explode the product structure in a time-phased mode to create the material requirements planning data. The diagram illustrates the parent component relationships. There are only the parent component. There's not a parent and a list of components. This allows the system to calculate, based on the low-level code, the number of items that are required for gross requirement. We'll go ahead and look at that next month to determine how we set the make-buy codes for items. The bill of material, if we set that on its edge, we can take the end product that has a due date, offset it by the lead time to a start date, That then becomes the due date for the subassembly. Offset that. Start date to due date offset back to start date, and all the way back to our purchased items to calculate what is called the cumulative manufacturing lead time. QAD gives the capability of defining what is called a BOM code. The BOM codes are normally item of the parent item. However, BOM codes allow you to create item-specific structures, common structures, alternate structures, and co and byproducts. So let's look at the 13.5. This is the parent component relationship. The parent item is the highest or the topmost item for a particular item in the product structure. And then the component is the code of the component item in the product structure. Each level in the product structure includes only those components that are directly going into that parent. So you can't define a cyclical product structure. The reference field, this is only required if you have the same component appearing on the product structure at the same level. For example, transistors on a circuit board. I've seen some interesting use of this particular field. The start date is critical to how MRP works. This is the first date of the effectiveness of that parent component relationship. No date overlaps are allowed. Now, once where the company that did not start off using start and end effectivity dates, and about 3 years into the project, it was recognized this was a critical mistake, as one could not create or reconstruct bills of material in the past, and it was a pain to fix. The quantity per, this is probably the most important element in your MRP environment. This tells you how many children it takes to make of the stocking unit of measure into the parent. The structure date allows you to define a blank as the normal parent-child relationship, but you can also create alternates, use it for documents, co and byproducts, local phantoms, planning, and optional codes. The first and last date of the parent relationship are effective as displayed. I've seen organizations go through some real pain if they don't do that correctly. Remarks, very handily, no real impact other than history. If you wanted to find some statement for relationships. The scrap increases the gross requirement of a component, but it doesn't actually show specifically in QAD, and we'll look at that this next month when we look at the MRP calculation. Lead time offset, MRP uses this for manufacturing pick lists, and MRP determines the date of component requirements using the lead time plus the lead time offset. Operations tie routing sequences to specific parent-child relationships. You can use a sequence number to define what the process is. The forecast percentage is used by MRP when the structure type is either P or O. You have the option for a option group and a process. The alternate 1315 allows you to use those BOM codes to create other sets of components for either work orders or purchase orders. Phantoms we talked about in terms of global at the item level or at a local level for just the parent component relationship. QAD's product change control PCC module is a tool that can be used to define changes to items in a sandbox environment. We'll talk more about this next month, but this allows you to control better the changes to your MRP environment. So there's many reasons why bombs cause adverse effects in MRP, incorrect statement of parent-component relationships, inaccurate quantity period, structure type, start and end date, scrap. Bombs require much concentration on the constant detail. People with skill and experience and knowledge in the ways of MRP are required to control your bills of material. So what have we covered today? Well, we've covered MRP a little bit, talked about item master, bombs, control files. MRP is hard. It takes a concerted team effort to understand accuracy, timeliness, consistency, and planning and execution. Managing MRP tables and QADs has always been time consuming and tricky. It requires not only good understanding of ERP principles and strategies, it also requires a lot of manual keying. 32soft's data loaders make managing ERP details fast, safe, easy, and error-free. You want to get better at MRP. You want to learn your product. You want to understand the QAD tables. You want to remember how QAD works. And you can do this by online resources, courses, books to read, certification. The best approach is likely reading the overview materials and some sort of formal course or certificate programs. Obviously, if you have a MRP sandbox, that is also tremendously helping. To better build your MRP acumen, you should look at the QAD forums, the QAD user groups, either West Coast, Midwest, or Southeast have great discussion boards and resource. The knowledge base is available for you. The document library is a great source of information, and the QAD learning centers. There's also LinkedIn groups and Progress Talk QAD forums. We've included a link here to all of the URLs that we use to develop this particular presentation. So if you need to look at any more detail, and here is a list of hashtags that may be helpful for you. If you have enjoyed this primary look at item master and bill of material, we'll take a deeper look next month at the ripple effect of everyday changes on MRP. And if you've got any more questions, I will turn it back to you, Denise. Thank you.
Wow, Don, thank you so much. MRP and QAD guru indeed. We will move right into the Q&A. As Don mentioned, next month he will be back with more on MRP. Don will show us the ripple effect of everyday changes, the ripple effect everyday changes have on MRP. Darn, I messed that up again. And then in April, I swore I was going to get it smooth this month. Then in April, we are really excited to show achievable production plans, no ERP needed. This webinar will be available on demand on April 17th. We will still send out invitations and reminders, and as always, of course, all registrants will receive our replay with a link to the published version as well. Also in April, we will be attending the Midwest User Group Spring Conference. As usual, Don will be presenting, but he will be joined by Cal to present Factory Physics, and they will open the business process track on Monday morning. And before we close out today's session, for anyone who may have missed the beginning today, or as a reminder, the thank you for attending email you will receive tomorrow will be from Alex. It will contain a link at the bottom of the email to download your personalized certificate of attendance for anyone who's interested. Because we can't replicate or regenerate those links, be sure to get your certificate downloaded before you delete the email. Okay, so let's close today with an analogy. In the world of manufacturing, MRP is like the GPS for your production and supply chain management.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, helps to navigate the complexities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're good, anything else, Don? Did we cover everything?
No, MRP, like I say, been around 50 years. There's so many people that think it's a magic bullet. It's not a magic bullet. We are the magic bullet. We need to understand how MRP works. And all those 80 some odd fields that we just went through, every one of them needs to be accurate, understood, timely, and updated on a regular basis. I see so many companies just implementing MRP and walking away from it and then say, well, why doesn't MRP work? Well, it takes a lot of work to make MRP work.
I like that. I'm going to derive a quote and quote you next month for for the next one. Okay, well, Don, thank you so much for all of your time taken to prepare and share with us your expertise. And as always, thank you all for taking out time to join us live for today's session. And we do hope to see you back again next month. From all of us at 32Soft, have a great day, everybody.